We go. All right. Like I said, my name's Dan. Your name is. Thank you. Let me show you what I'm doing. This is I did a broadcast of this last Friday, I think it was, where I was doing the outline in ink and a pen. Oops.
My name's Dan.
And as you can see, I have proceeded from the outline to the next, the second most tedious step of the process, which is crosshatching with a rapidograph pen. Some of you young people don't even know what this is. It used to be the workhorse of the graphic arts industry. Amazing, hard to believe. Hard to imagine a world before computers, before digital, eh? Let me show you a finished cover. Here it is, a big picture of it. And now back to a more close-up shot. There we go. So again, this is the original artwork on what was CS10 paper. They don't make that anymore. I told that story last week. This is now just single ply Bristol board. And can you see the cross-hatching? I can only get so close before it starts going fuzzy, I know. I think it might be. One of the big questions is, and then airbrush. So the cross-hatching is the second most tedious step. What is the most tedious step? It is cutting the frisket. Frisket is like great big Scotch tape. More like if you've ever used removable or movable Scotch tape. It's not as sticky as Scotch tape, but it's like that, and it's real big. I cut it out, and then I'm going to, and I'll show you this too. I'll do a broadcast of this when the time comes. Then you grab, I don't have a swivel knife here. Do I? Oh yeah, here we go. Then I use a swivel X-Acto knife. It actually spins around. You can't see that with my glove in the way. It spins around. I use that and a regular X-Acto knife, and I cut out essentially every shape in this illustration. It is at that point that I'll be cursing myself for putting 11 different characters. In other words, all the details. It's like, oh man, why did I put in so much detail? This would be so much easier if there wasn't so much going on. But for now, it is cross-hatching time. And as I said, I'm using a rapidograph pen. And this is the double aught, or the .30, I don't know, millimeter. I don't know what that is. Here's a little trick for you. I have a piece of Post-it note, actually a stack of only 2 at the moment, because this pen is rather fussy. And as you can see, I've already done most of the cross-hatching, because of course I'm not even going to let you watch me finish this. This is probably 3 hours of work. Just the cross-hatching, not the drawing, not everything that came before that. Just the cross-hatching so far has been about 3 hours of work. So let me get to work here, and I'll get you in as close as I can without hopefully making it blurry. Now the light is coming from the upper, I'll put it right side up again. The light's coming from the upper right, so I'm very aware of that. So the shadows are always on the lower left. And let's get going on this boy's hair here. The real question someone who's thinking should ask is, why? Why on earth would you use such a tedious, and nowadays we would have to say old-fashioned? All of this could be done so much easier in Photoshop or Illustrator. It could be done so much more easily on the computer. Well, there are two reasons. One is I've been doing these Kidsville covers for 26 years, and they want what they've got. They don't want innovation. They want tradition. So that's what they're getting. But the question still remains, why did I ever start doing Kidsville news, even 26 years ago? By the way, I don't like the cross-hatching under that little boy's nose. I'm going to probably touch it. It looks too much like a dirty nose, runny nose, mustache, something. Those things happen. I will touch that up after the airbrushing is all done. I'll probably pull out some gouache paints, opaque watercolor paints, and there are a number of things that will need to be touched up at that point. So that's just all part of the process. So the question is then, if I'm going to do airbrushing on top of this cartoon, why do I need cross-hatching? And of course the answer is I don't. I'll say the right word here in a second. The airbrush could take care of all the shading all by itself. Of course, that's what an airbrush is best at, rendering a rounded or modeled form. So I don't need to do cross-hatching to get, the rounded shadows. And the answer is purely abstract. The answer is not to make it more realistic. It would actually be technically more realistic, if you will. Of course, it's a cartoon, so how realistic can it get? But it'd be more realistic if it was just airbrush. Then why go to all the work? As I said, it's already 3 hours, probably, maybe more, but about 3 hours of cross-hatching. I've been sitting here listening to podcasts, listening to things, pretty music in the background, and somebody talking in the foreground during much of the morning. And the reason for doing it is because one of the words I used 13 years ago when I did a broadcast very similar to this. I was working on a Kidsville cover at that time and talking about cross-hatching. And I called it candy for the eyes. You could say that all of art, visual art is what I mean, all of visual art is predicated upon the notion that our eyes like to see stuff. In fact, I could expand that one more step and say, given the option, not only do our eyes always enjoy seeing stuff, they would rather see more stuff than less stuff. Now, that gets us almost into crazy philosophical, because some smart aleck will say, yeah, but less is more. And I could uncork an entire lecture on why less is not more. Anyway, but we'll let it go. I won't uncork that lecture today. Our eyes enjoy seeing stuff, and generally speaking, whereas there are moments when our eyes enjoy seeing less, most of the time, given the choice, our eyes would rather see more. Let me give you a few examples. Would our eyes prefer to open their eyelids and gaze upon a scene that is brown, gray, brown, gray, brown, gray, brown. Now the answer to that is yeah, sometimes. Sometimes a brown, gray, I'll say landscape, just for want of a better. A brown, gray landscape is mysterious, maybe romantic, maybe melancholy, and so on. So there are moments when, yeah, our eyes get a big kick out of, like a fog. Now, this is not brown-gray, but a foggy morning. I don't know about you, but where we live, foggy mornings are not very common. So they're fun. They're full of mystery, like, ooh, it's foggy this morning. I love it. Can you relate to that? Now, if you live in a place like I did growing up in Michigan, where it's foggy pretty often, that's not the feeling you have. The feeling you have is, oh, drat, foggy again. But there's something mysterious about the mist and so on and so on and so on and so forth. But generally speaking, our eyes don't prefer foggy, gray, brown landscapes. Generally speaking, our eyes like to see color. That's why if we drive by a bush, green bush, we tend to ignore it, yawn, not notice, drive right on by without doing anything. Whereas if we drive by a green bush covered with fuchsia, pink, purple, white blossoms, we tend to do a double take. We tend to look and say, wow, look at that bush. What was the difference? Color. There's a time where we enjoy melancholic, minimal artwork. But most of the time, our eyes enjoy color. Anyway, okay, so that's one example of our eyes like to see stuff. Here's another one. All things being equal, which sometimes they're not equal, but all things being equal, would our eyes prefer to see a smooth, regular, not undulating, not variegated, but a smooth texture, or would our eyes prefer to see texture? And of course the answer is our eyes always, all things being equal, our eyes prefer to see more, not less. So texture generally is a good thing. Now, some of you might be saying, yeah, but our bedroom ceiling is a popcorn ceiling, and I hate it. Well, there's a lot of issues. Popcorn ceilings are not popular. They're not in style anymore. So that is not, as I said, all things being equal. If you use your popcorn ceiling as an example of how eyes like to see non-texture, by the same token, if a drywall installer does a bad job on your drywall, there will be lines and creases in texture, and you won't like it. Yeah, but that's a different that's a different matter. Again, if an insect lands on your picnic table and it's smooth black, smooth black, you go, get out of here. But if an insect lands on your picnic table and it has a fascinating, intricate detail, then you go, wow, look at this bug. Do you follow me? So let me repeat my basic thesis. All things being equal, in other words, there are a number of factors that could change this, but if there are not these factors present, like we don't want to see texture on our drywall, we want to see our wall smooth. All things being equal, our eyes like to see stuff. So why do I go to all the work of doing hours and hours of cross-hatching on these Kidsville news covers? And the reason is because it's fun to look at. There you go. That's the deep philosophical truth. In fact, I have a definition of art and a definition of good art. Now, if you or anybody you know got a master's degree in art, then you will, well, you'd be turning over in your grave, except you're not dead yet. So if you were dead, you'd be turning over in your grave, because I'm about to say something that absolutely flies in the face of the standard accepted wisdom of the Artist Academy. I disagree violently, just to put it bluntly, with the ethos and the philosophy and the worldview of the Art Academy. Okay, so here's my definition of art. Again, it should be very unpopular with every art professor in every art department in every university in the Western world. But I can't help it that they're all wrong. They have a philosophical worldview with which I disagree. Anyway, here's my definition of art. Art is, are you ready? Art is stuff that's made to look at. Art, definition of art. Art, stuff, not visual art. I'm not talking about music, poetry, dance, and everything. I'm just talking about what most of us use when we use the term art by itself. We usually mean visual art. All right, definition of visual art: stuff that's made to look at. Now there's kind of a dot or an ellipse or a paragraph break or something, because the next thing I say has to be added to that. Art is stuff that's made to look at for no auxiliary purpose. Let me explain for a minute. Someone might say, well, if art is stuff that's made to look at, then traffic lights are art, because we're supposed to look at them and stop when they turn red. Are you with me? But that is not so, because traffic lights, traffic signs, all kinds of things in our visual world are made to look at, but for an auxiliary purpose. We look at them so that we will do something, right? So that is not art. Art is stuff that's made to look at for no other reason, purpose, except to look at it. Fair enough? Okay, it's getting feedback. Hello, Artist Ross. Thank you. Thanks for popping in. Hello, Marcus. So art is stuff that's made to look at. Now I'm going to get even more bodacious. I'm going to drive every MFA person up the frickin' wall, because I'm going to tell you what good art is. Are you ready? Put on your seatbelt. Art, stuff that's made to look at. Good art, stuff that's made to look at that people enjoy looking at. Ta-da! No, that's a lame definition. It's very true. It's very real. By the way, let me add another. Some might say, well, pornography, that's made to look at, and people enjoy looking at it. Once again, that is an auxiliary purpose. Okay, so no, that it is not art. It does not count as art, and I'm not even talking here about nudes in art. I could, boy, that'd be another subject. If it's a nude in art, then it is not pornography. If it is pornography as an oil painting, then it is not art. It's pornography. But anyway, and at that point we could debate about this or that or this or that or this or that painting. Anyway, okay, right. So back to my definition: art, stuff that's made to look at. Good art, stuff that's made to look at. That, wow, for some reason, people really enjoy looking at this or that painting or drawing. So we can all think of literally hundreds of examples of this. All the great medieval, the Mona Lisa, Rembrandt stuff, Michelangelo's, Sistine Chapel, Michelangelo's David, all those things. It's stuff that's made to look at. Now you might say, well, yeah, but those things, they were made to look at to raise money for the Catholic Church, or to get the blah blah blah. Yeah, no, yeah, but those are it was not made by Michelangelo to raise money. It was made to be good to look at. And if other people use it to raise money, that shame on them. It has nothing to do with the artist. Okay, so again, let's keep our definitions clear here. Stuff that's made to look at that people actually enjoy looking at. And it turns out that human beings through the millennia enjoy looking at the same stuff. To just put it really bluntly, I have in my bank of articles and lectures that I'm going to release on the unsuspecting public sometime here in the next year or two. I have hundreds of articles that they actually will be published. Many of them will be published. Here's one. I call it ORF. ORF. ORF, and it's in the plural, so I add an S. Or ORF S. And ORF is an oft repeated falsehood. It's a really fun list. It would make some of you laugh and some of you get mad. But here's the fact of the matter. Our culture, our society, has a number of things, sayings, expressions, rattling around in it that most people, they believe that they are true because they've heard it so often. In other words, it is oft repeated. But in spite of the fact that it's oft repeated, it's actually false. Oh boy. And of course, I write these things. I will disseminate these things partly to engender a lively conversation. Mostly, I will release them, hopefully, to increase the wisdom of the general population. Just because something is said a lot doesn't mean that it's true. In fact, I've already given you one today, already in this short broadcast. Less is more. And this oft repeat is false. More is more. That's why we call it more. I said that's one of the most famous lines in my old penny crosshatching video. Less is more. I mean, more means more. That's why we call it more. The expression less is more has a very particular history, and it is spoken in a very particular context. But then it was picked up by a number of imitators and repeated because many people think that by repeating an ORF, their friends are going to think they're smart. Oh boy, I'm just getting myself in more and more trouble, aren't I? So most ORFs are spoken by people who aren't really thinking about them, but they heard it said one time and it sounded smart, so they're going to say it, so they sound smart. Here's another ORF. You ready? This is said all the time, and I believe it's false. Here it is. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. You've been told that your entire life, so much so that you've never really thought to question it. You've accepted it as absolute gospel truth, to use the expression. And I'm here to tell you that it's complete BS. Well, no, that's not true. There's a grain of truth. All these ORFs have a grain of truth in them, but essentially they're not true. So, and this would be a great, great, great philosophical debate. In fact, it has been a philosophical debate for hundreds of years in history. And if I took the time, which I will not, I'm not going to argue the point right now, but I absolutely believe that essentially the statement, beauty is in the eye of the beholder, is false. It's not true. I think there is such a thing as objective beauty. Once again, that would put me on the outs. It would put me very much out of favor with the art academy, the art departments of most. Earlier today I said all. That isn't quite true, but most, certainly most art departments in most universities in the Western world, from Basel to Boston, all the professors would disagree with me, and that's okay. That doesn't even make me I don't even quail about that. Never mind. And someday when I give you the full lecture, you'll say, "Wow, he really doesn't quail, does he?" To quail means to shrink back in fear of being shrink back in fear of opposition. So I do not quail. I do have a degree in art, not a master's degree in art. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts degree from a pretty standard, typical university, and I disagree with I learned almost nothing, first of all, and then much of what I did learn philosophically, I agree with quite vehemently. I do have a master's degree, and it's more like in philosophy than which is much closer to my true center than art. Anyway, so let me see. Here's just for fun, just to irritate my listeners. Hello, Michael. Good to see you. Hello, Paulus Arts. You'll allow it. Okay. Now, let me give you another ORF. I heard this one just the other. And again, these are sayings that are repeated often in our culture. So often that most people take them as truisms, gospel truth, not even debating. So, brace yourself, because I'm liable to offend somebody. Once again, I don't quaver because it doesn't bother me. Now, when I'm in conversation one-on-one with you, yes, I'm very sensitive and kind and gentle, and I do not say things to offend you. But this is different. This is a public broadcast, so I can. Here's another one. History is written, right? You know where I'm going with this? Because you've heard it. If you've been around in the world at all, history is written by the winners. That has been said so many times in your presence by so many smart people that you have just swallowed it. Yes, sirree, that's true. History is written. Now, like all ORFs, oft-repeated fallacies or falsehoods, there's a grain of truth there. There is a grain of truth in it. But as I like to say, it's a raisin of truth inside a watermelon of folly. That's what all ORFs are. Oft-repeated falsehoods, always. They're grain of truth inside a watermelon of folly. So what is the truth? The truth is the winners and the losers write history. Now, don't get me wrong. Don't think I'm ignorant. Oh no, Dan. The history books that we print and publish and read in high school and college were written by these Don't give me that. I know all that. I have an education, but that's not really what makes me me. What has made me me is not my book learning, but my hard learning for the last 50 years. Let me give you a classic example of the opposite of that, okay? History is written by the winners. False. It's an oft-repeated falsehood. After the Civil War, I forget this man's name. You could look it up. You can look it up right now. There was an editor of one of the major newspapers of Richmond, Virginia. So, Southern Confederate city, Southern Confederate newspaper. After the Civil War was lost, this man, I forget his name, but you could look up, he wrote a book called The Lost Cause. In fact, you can download the entire PDF free. I've done it. I read about as much as I could stomach. Now, why does it matter? Well, it matters because, first of all, the book, it could rightly be called a diatribe, I have nothing against diatribes. You could say what I'm doing right now is a diatribe. But the book is a diatribe against all things Union, Northern, Lincoln, everything. And boy, is he mad. Oh my goodness, is he angry. We have a name for that, a very important name. When you let anger go in, go deep, and go long, what do we call it? Do you know? Anger, long fuse, long-term anger. What do you call it? Do you know? Bitterness, right. Good for you. Bitterness. And oh my goodness, every page of this book is dripping with bitterness, invective out the wazoo. I don't know what the wazoo is, but whatever it is, invective is coming out of it. Oh my God. Now, why does it matter? Because you've never heard of this book. Now, if you're a Southerner, you may have heard of it, but you probably have never heard of it. Probably never heard of it. So why bring it up? I bring it up because the bitterness spelled out in the book, again, the title is The Lost Cause. And the bitterness, the invective spewed forth out the wazoo, whatever the wazoo is, has deeply influenced the southern states over the last, 150 years? Deep now. I'm not blaming anybody. I'm really not taking sides here even. I'm just telling you, if you want to know where a lot of the attitudes come from, they actually came from that book. History is sometimes written by the losers, and it has great ramifications and impact. So there you go. Just that, and that was just for fun. I don't even care to get into the debate, and so on and so forth. I just want to point out. Okay, back to the point at hand. No, beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Hogwash. I could demonstrate that again with my hour-and-a-half long lecture that I will not give you today. Why does it come up? It comes up to answer the question, why am I enduring all the tedium? That's one of my favorite words. I'll come back to that if I remember in a few minutes. Why am I suffering through? 'Cause don't get me wrong. Sitting here for 4 hours doing line, scratch, 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 scratch. What is it? It is tedious. No, I'm not suffering from tedium right now. Why? Because I'm talking to you guys. And I see Duana Bennett. Am I saying that right? Or is it Duana? Forgive me. I'm going to say Duana. Oh my goodness. Yes, I've been on more and I expect to be more. Oh, so Duana's on my side. I didn't make her angry. Good. Did you must have got a degree or you know something about it. Because it's usually only those of us who really experienced it who know why we are unhappy with the that particular culture. All right. Tedium. T-E-D-I-U-M. The question is, why am I enduring so much tedium simply to put these little bitty 10,000, I don't know how many, it'd be interesting to know, wouldn't it? My wife used to say, if we had a penny for every line, because this used to be my main, years and years and years before I was a oil painter. For years, decades, I was an illustrator, and pen and ink was my primary medium. So I have drawn, I'm assuming it's millions of lines. Anyway, why do I endure the tedium? The answer is because the human eye, all things considered, all things being equal, generally speaking, the human eye would rather see, yes, texture than no texture. I'm putting it as bluntly and as plainly as I can. So all these little lines don't mean anything. They just have a visual impact. They're simply here to make, and I'll show you again just for fun. Here's the finished. Okay, so let's look at this boy's ear, for instance. You can tell That's a cartoon profile of a boy. Eyelash, nose, ear, back of ear, hair, right? And all of that could be rendered with great big fat lines done with a brush and an airbrush. But I didn't. I did crosshatching. Crosshatching is not necessary for realism's sake. It just makes it more fun to look at. There you go. So that's why I do it. Because, and again, this gets into beauty is in the eye of the beholder. No, it's not. That's false. There's a grain of truth in it. Yes, there is variety. There is some subjectivity. You say tomato, I say tomato. You know, somebody likes Van Gogh and somebody else likes Rembrandt. By the way, it's really fun. If you ever get the chance to visit Amsterdam in the Netherlands, I've been there twice, and there is a street in Amsterdam where the museum, I'm heading in one direction, those of you who have been there will know, the Rembrandt Museum, which is called the Rijksmuseum, is on the left, and the Van Gogh Museum is on the right. And I think it would be really interesting to stand there someday with a clipboard or a camera and take a movie or make a list of everybody that turns left and everybody that turns right. So there you go. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Some like Rembrandt, some like Van Gogh. But the fact is, both Rembrandt and Van Gogh, as different as they are in style and technique, they're both masterful, jaw-dropping, amazing examples of beauty. And that's why people go all the way to Amsterdam, like I did, to visit. The last time I was there, I went to the Rijksmuseum. I went to the Rembrandt Museum, and I'm glad that I did. But if I ever go back, next time, I'm going to go to the Van Gogh Museum. So there is a variety of taste. There is, and that's what people mean when they say beauty's in the eye of the beholder. But it is essentially untrue. From the cave paintings of Lascaux, France, 50,000 years, they say, whatever. From the cave paintings of Lascaux, France, to the paintings that are admitted into the Oil Painters of America annual show, there is great uniformity of opinion about what is beautiful. There is. And what I'm doing right now is related to that, because I happen to know I have secret inside information. I'm being silly. My secret inside information is that all things being equal, people, the human eye, gets a kick out of seeing texture. So these little lines are just for fun. Eye candy is the first thing I call them. Just fun to look at. Good art is stuff that's made to look at, that people enjoy looking at. So that's why I'm doing it. Now, let me change gears just a little bit. Yes, Michael, I did. I had 5 million views on my pen and ink cross-hatching. That's, part of the reason why any of you have ever found me is because of that one video. Whether you saw it or not, that's what put me up in the rankings, even enough for you to find me. So it is kind of fun, funny, something, 13 years later, to be doing yet again another pen and ink cross-hatching illustration. In fact, one of those that I did 12 years ago that went slightly viral was, in fact, me doing a Kidsville news cover. So there we go. That's why I titled this "Doing Pen and Ink Cross-Hatching" again. All right, tedium. I'm nearly finished with this, by the way, aren't I? Yahoo. Tedium. Tedium is pain. It is a very particular. It's a psychological form of pain, also known as boredom. As what are some other words? You could pull up your phone and say to Google, give me some synonyms for tedium. I'm not thinking of them right now, so I'll let you do that. But it's painful. Tedium is not fun. Routine, extreme routine, doing 4 hours of is not fun. And that's why most of the time when you guys aren't here, I am listening to a podcast, somebody talking. I have music in the background and somebody talking to help get me through the tedium. But I'm a huge believer in the power of tedium. In fact, part of what prompted this was actually 12 or 13 years ago when I was doing one of these very covers, and some young person, I can only assume that it was a young person, said, "Oh, that's way too much. Why do you do so much work? That's way too much work. I would never do that." And my instant response was, "That's correct. And that's why I am a highly paid artist who makes a living from his artwork. And you probably will never be that. Why? Because you refuse to suffer the pain of tedium. It is a price I am willing to pay to create something that's fun to look at. In fact, it's so much fun to look at that I'm literally being paid this very day, if you will, for each tedious stroke that I make. Now, it's still painful. Don't get me wrong. Just because I'm getting paid doesn't mean I go, whoopee! No. Tedium is tedium, and it is painful. But I probably you could write this down, one of the chief characteristics of Dan Nelson, the person you're watching and listening to right now, one of my chief characteristics in life is that I'm willing to endure tedium in many, many respects. Some of you know I am a musician. I'm a pretty good musician. Now, I'm not so good at the moment. I could have done so, but thank God I didn't try. I could have played in the symphony, perhaps. Glad I didn't try. The people that play in the symphony, most of them are neurotic to the point of something. And I bless them and I love them. And I'm glad they do it. Anyway, every good musician you know, if they're good because they have suffered outrageously the pain of tedium. The better they are, the more tedium they have suffered. Let me say that again. You know some musicians, or you see them on YouTube or TV or whatever? Every good music. Now, by the way, I'm not here to, forgive me, I'm not really talking about singers. Sorry, they're not musicians. Some of them are, but just because they're a singer doesn't mean they're a musician. Many singers are great singers, but they're not musicians. It's just God graced their vocal cords, their sinus cavities, and all the rest of their head in such a way that when they open their mouth and sing, everybody goes, "Wow, that sounds nice." So anyway, there are many. Now, there are many musicians, singers who are musicians, but many are not. Anyway, so I'm talking about, if you will, real musicians. What is a real musician? Is somebody who practices. That is to say, someone who endures tedium. And many people that you might call a musician because they get out the git fiddle and play on every Friday night, that's not really a musician. I'm being a snob. I'm being a musical snob here. A musician is somebody who suffers tedium. And if they're good because they suffered more tedium. If they're really good, they suffered more than. Now, they also have a gifting, probably, that, they got encouragement that led them to be willing to endure all this suffering. Anyway, I'm getting too deep in the weeds. Let me pull back and say tedium is one of the lost arts of Western civilization. The ability to suffer the pain of doing something over and over and over again. So, and again, just to give you, I describe myself as a practicing musician. I practice every day, or 5 days a week. I keep track. Last year, I practiced an average of 3 instruments every day. Average. Sometimes 7, 8, 9 instruments, but at least on average, sometimes none, but on average 3 instruments a day. Generally speaking, so how good are you? Hard to say. I'm going to play. You've seen me play some. Usually when I walk into a room full of musicians, all the other musicians say, "Ooh, Dan just walked in. That's all I'm going to say. Generally, but I'm not good enough to play in the symphony. That would require a good deal more tedium than I am willing to give to it right now. So I've settled for who and what I am. But the only point I want to make is that I've endured tedium. I'm also a writer. Writing is easy. It's editing that's the bugaboo. And editing is tedious. You do it again and 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 again. Whew. Anyway, so much for tedium. All right. Any other chats going on? I've lost everybody. I probably bored everybody to tears. Well, I think I'm done. I think I'm actually done. I'll look carefully after I quit broadcasting to make sure that I didn't miss anything, and I probably did, but I'll find it in a minute. Thanks for watching. You've helped me endure my tedium. I appreciate it very much. And when I come back, which won't be today, I'll let you watch just a few minutes of me cutting the frisket. Just a few minutes. That's dreadfully boring. This is the second most tedium. The most tedious is cutting out each little piece. And then I'll let you watch me do the airbrushing. If you don't want to wait, you can go on the same channel, go back to one of my earliest videos 12, 13 years ago, and you can find me doing all of these steps on Kidsville. Enough of that. Thanks for watching. Appreciate it. Thanks for your chats and comments. I appreciate it. And hope you have a great day. And hope to see you again soon. Bye-bye.